This is the Snodgrass podcast. Thank you guys for joining me today. I have a guest named Paul Moore today out of Virginia. But before I talk about Paul, go over to the Brett Snodgrass channel on YouTube and subscribe. Please leave a comment because we love replying to comments every single day. That is what we do. That is how we get noticed. So please leave a comment and like this particular video. Now, who is Paul Moore? Paul Moore is a founder and managing partner of Wellings Capital. Paul tells his story about how he was successful, retired at the age of 33, lost everything, and then got into real estate investing, and now he's in commercial real estate investing, and he is coming out with a new book about self-storage that you can get on BiggerPockets. He's a contributor to BiggerPockets.com. He has so many business accolades, I cannot mention them all. This is a very, very, very successful man, but he is also a man of faith, and he's been wrestling for many years about his faith, being in the marketplace, on if he should, dig deeper into the marketplace as an entrepreneur or go into ministry as a pastor. I think as believers, we all have this tension, this struggle inside of us, and Paul really lays it out and how us entrepreneurs can really, really have such an impact on the kingdom. He talks about that. He also talks about his heart on human trafficking. You guys are going to want to listen to that. So now here is my guest on today's podcast, Mr. Paul Moore. What's going on, Paul?
Hey, Brett. It's going great. Thanks for having me on. It's a real honor to be on your show.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and I've known you for a while, part of the same groups, Mastermind Group, Collective Genius, brother here, brother in Christ, brother in business, entrepreneur, and BiggerPockets, where we've both been on the BiggerPockets podcast, I saw, and you're a contributor there as well. And it's just an honor to have you on, man. So I know we've talked about our faith, our business, and crossings at the different groups that we're in. And yeah, man, welcome to the show. And I would like to start every show with this question. This is a little bit of a deeper question, but I always love to start off this question. It is this: who is Paul Moore?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I have spent years trying to get to a place where I was able to shake this problem I've had in my head. And, speaking of Christian entrepreneurship, when I became a Christian my senior year in college, I went on to get an MBA, and halfway through, I wanted to quit to go to ministry school. I thought I need to be in like some kind of seminary. I want to be in ministry. And then I went ahead and reluctantly finished my MBA. But then as soon as I got married, I wanted to go to the mission field. And I just really believed, I had this problem for like 30 years. And the problem was right here between my ears. I truly believed, and I'm still having a hard time shaking the belief that the people in full-time ministry were the really godly ones. I thought maybe someday I could be like a missionary. Well, at least an elder or a pastor, or at least an administrative assistant at a church. It's like, what was I thinking? I didn't know that I was already in full-time ministry the day I got saved, just like you were. And, we have more opportunities to touch the world. We have more opportunities to connect with lost and hurting people than most pastors do, And I didn't realize that. And I'm so glad that I realize it now. It's in my head. Now I got to get it down into my heart. And so who's Paul Moore? He's a guy who's been struggling for years with productivity issues, with organizational issues, a guy who, I have a podcast called How to Lose Money After All, Brett. So, I'm really good about admitting faults. I love Jesus. I love my family, and I love doing business. And the hardest question was on the BiggerPockets podcast is one of your last questions, which is, what do you do in your free time? And I'm going to jump to that and just tell you, when I was on the BiggerPockets podcast in 2018, I'm going to be on again next week. I froze when Brandon asked me that. And I was like, my real answer was, I love to work. But I made up some, answer about, well, I love to spend time with my family, which I do. Yeah. I do. But I've been a workaholic for years, and that's this productivity thing has just been a monster for me.
Yeah. I think it's something that we all as entrepreneurs struggle with. I always find myself wanting to, work on projects. It doesn't have to be business per se, but if I'm not doing business, I need a project. Maybe it's around the house. Maybe it's in my family. When I'm not doing my business, my family gets on me because I'm like digging deep into how to systematize our routines within our family too. So I think we all struggle with that. So just take yourself back too. You got saved in college and you decided to go into business. You've had an amazing career too, right? So talk to us about this, because you were very successful at a really young age. And I don't know if that hindered you or helped you, but I think you retired briefly at 33 years old. Mm-hmm. And tell us about this story real quick. So,
I got an engineering degree, which was my first mistake. Then I got an MBA and went to Ford Motor Company for 5 years. I really liked Ford, but I had to face the fact that every evening and weekend I was trying to tinker with trying to figure out how to start a side business. I finally realized I should be an entrepreneur. So another guy from Ohio State and Ford joined me. I should say I joined him. He was a year into starting his own business, and I left Ford. And we had a really fun run for 5 years. And Wall Street really liked this type of staffing company. And so a lot of companies went public. One of them acquired our little company. And I found myself with a couple $1 million in the bank. And I thought, I'm a full-time investor now. And I was really a full-time speculator is what I was. But I actually did go into ministry really briefly at that point. I actually started a nonprofit that worked with, that hosted international students in the Blue Ridge Mountains for a Blue Ridge Mountain retreat weekend. And that was fun. But there was only a handful of weekends a year we did this. So I got bored really quick. I started flipping houses. Then I started flipping lots at waterfront lots at Smith Mountain Lake, I should say. Mm-hmm. I started building houses, and I learned something really important, Brett. It's really good not to build a house from the ground up if you don't know how to tighten your own doorknob. I'm just saying. Yeah. I found that out. And anyway, but I was always interested in how do people get in commercial real estate? How do they do that? And I actually found my way into commercial by building a multifamily, sort of a quasi motel for oil executives, managers, and workers in the Bakken of North Dakota during that big oil boom in 2010 to 15. So that's how we got started in multifamily. I ended up writing a book on multifamily and then expanded later into self-storage and mobile home parks. And we have now we have 5 funds that we manage.
Yeah. And that's such an amazing story again. And I've seen your success just grow in the past few years. And you got a new book coming out about self-storage investing. You've had other books out there about multifamily investing. And so talk to us, like you've shifted into self-storage. Let's just talk about that. You got this new book coming out. What's it about? Who's that for?
Yeah. So the new book's called Storing Up Profits, Capitalize on America's Obsession with Stuff from or by Investing in Self-Storage. Bigger Pockets Publishing is putting that out. And, when I heard about self-storage, I heard about self-storage value adds, and I laughed. I mean, I was like, wait, where are the counters and cabinets and lighting, flooring, fixtures, paint, all that stuff? I mean, we're talking about 4 pieces of sheet metal, some rivets, a floor, and a door.
Yeah.
Where's the value adds, Well, there are a lot of value adds in self-storage. And I was pleasantly surprised at how much upside, especially because there's so many mom and pop operators. About half of the 53,000 facilities in the U.S., which is the same as McDonald's, Starbucks, and Subway combined, are mom and pop owners, and they don't have the resources, knowledge, or desire to upgrade the facilities to increase income and maximize value. And so I wrote a book about self-storage, giving a layperson all that kind of detail, getting them excited about self-storage, how the metrics work, how the math and operations work. That's the first third of the book. The second third of the book is 4 strategies, like ground up, or value add, or taking an old Kmart and converting it, things like that. And then the third, last third of the book, I should say, is 7 different paths to get into self-storage or into any commercial real estate. So I talk to people on Bigger Pockets all the time. They want to get into, self-storage or mobile home parks or large multifamily, but they have no idea where to start. And so I have 7 different paths there. So I think people who could benefit from this would be people who want to get into self-storage as an employee or as an eventual owner, people who want to raise capital, or people who just want to passively invest in self-storage and they want to know what questions to ask before they invest.
Yeah. And it's just a personal question for me too, just about commercial, because I think investors have this hang up. It was almost like before I was a real estate investor, I thought, to be a real estate investor, to buy that first house, it was maybe out of my league. And then I started doing that and I was like, okay, well, I can do this, but still that commercial investment, it's still, people think it's out of my league. That's the big leagues. That's where the big boys play. I'm still in the minor leagues. So what do you say that can anyone get into commercial investing?
That's a great question. I mean, of course, anybody who's typically accredited as an accredited investor, who you are if you are, but it's definitely, generally $1 million plus net worth and some other criteria that are potentially, but you can definitely invest passively. But as far as getting in, there are ways in with no money or no training, et cetera. I mean, like one way is to be a deal finder. I mean, if you're really good at, handwriting letters or follow up or marketing type skills, or if you can, do a direct mail campaign, or if you have access or the time to go around, knocking on doors, you can be a deal finder. And that's your way in. That's a really, really valuable skill that a lot of, operators don't have somebody on their team to do that. Or you could be a capital raiser. Now, of course, that's a really valuable skill, but it comes with a lot of legal hoops. The SEC wants you to jump through to do that right. So don't just go out and expect to get a commission for raising capital. That's not generally legal. You could start as an employee. I know a guy who started as a porter in multifamily, an apartment during college, and now he's the CEO of the second or third largest apartment property management firm, Pinnacle, in the U.S. His name's Rick Graff, and I think you'd love to have him on the show, by the way. Follower of Jesus and just a really passionate guy. But he started as an employee, and Gary Keller started as an employee in real estate, and there's a lot of people who start there and can work their way into the business. So there's lots of different. Employee opportunities would be like property manager, assistant asset manager. Even a assistant to a mortgage broker or a real estate broker. I mean, those are great ways to get in there. A lot of people who were in commercial real estate as a broker are now owners.
Yeah. And that's how I started, honestly. I mean, I worked for a real estate company, kind of learn. That's a great way to learn. And a lot of the guys that had worked for our company, that's what they did. They worked for us, and then now they're doing their own business. So I totally agree. So that's a great book. Where can someone get the book that you're writing, Self-Storage? Bigger Pockets, Amazon?
Yeah, it would be biggerpockets.com/storage, and that'll take you right to the book.
Awesome. We're going to put that in our description on the Brett Snodgrass YouTube channel, guys, so check that out. Get Paul's book on self-storage investing. So, Paul, we're going to transition and talk about your faith. So you kind of began this podcast talking about who Paul Moore is. You said you've had this internal struggle, this wrestling match, and you're a believer in Christ. You want to fulfill and, work on the Great Commission, bring disciples to Christ, talk about the kingdom and bring the kingdom to this earth. You're in business and you kind of have this internal battle. He's like, oh, this again, it's kind of like this is where the big, pastors or, disciples, they're pastors, they're in ministry full time. And then here I am in business. I should go over here, but I'm good at this. So talk to us about this again. This has been this struggle. And you said it even still is a struggle today. And I think it's a struggle for all of us, right?
Yeah, I assume it's a struggle for other people as well. There are, we have so much more potential than Bill Gates or Elon Musk. Let's be honest here. Okay. Now, let's just break it down. Elon Musk, I mean, the wealthiest guy in the world right now, I believe. He was made in the image of God. God first revealed himself as a creator, right? And Elon Musk has maximized that being made in the image of God, but so were you and I. But second, we have the mind of Christ. And as far as I know, he doesn't. Third, we have the hope of glory, Jesus living within us. As far as I know, he doesn't. Fourth, we have the Holy Spirit living in us, and he doesn't. Now, it may sound like I'm being silly, but we have 4 times his capacity. What are we doing with it? Now, here's where it gets practical. The world is crying out at a time like I have never seen, Brett, for solutions. I mean, people are in turmoil. And the world is looking for answers to, obvious things like COVID, the political divide, economic problems. I mean, it just goes on and on. Well, I mean, let's be honest. God has an answer for every one of those, even those problems that seem like they couldn't be solved. Well, I mean, he helped Noah build a boat, right? Mm-hmm. And he's helping people now as well. And if we can bring solutions to the world, we can be problem solvers, we can be light bearers, and we can do things that, the world desperately needs. I mean, Romans says that the world is crying out. I believe it says, crying out for the sons of God to be revealed. Well, sons of God, sons of a creative genius, infinite genius, we should be able to tap into that. And, Matt McPherson did. Matt lives over in Wisconsin. Matt was an evangelist, a worship leader. He had 5 kids. He would go to these weekend church retreats and get like $28 in the offering. It really wasn't working out for him. Mm-hmm. Well, one day he sensed that God spoke this to his heart. And that was this. He said, God said, I have these solutions for every problem in the world, if people would just ask me. Mm. So he said, okay. And this sounded a little smart alecky, but I'm sure it wasn't. Matt said, okay, if you've got answers to every problem in the world, help me build a better compound bow. You would think he'd ask for a solution to world hunger or AIDS or something. But, Matt was a tinkerer. He was a hunter. He was a bow hunter, and he loved compound bows. And he was trying to invent a better compound bow because compound bows were invented in the late 60s. And they never worked perfectly because the 2 cams never were in perfect sync. Mm. And so the arrows would go a little bit to the side or a little bit up or down. Well, Matt was trying to figure this out. So he said, help me build a better compound bow. Well, Matt reports that about 2 weeks later, he was awakened from his sound sleep, and there was a piece of notebook paper effectively floating in front of his face. And the notebook paper had the 3 holes punched and the lines, but it had a schematic on it of a completely different kind of compound bow. Mm. So Matt got up and started copying it down. His wife said, what are you doing? He said, I think I'm having a vision. And so he copied it down. He went out and patented this bow. And now, Honda makes a whole lot of cars and makes a small profit on every car. Mm-hmm. Rolls-Royce makes a few cars a year and makes a huge profit on each car. Matt McPherson's company, Matthews, makes the largest number of compound bows in the world and makes an enormous profit on each one. My son has like a $2,000 Matthews bow, and he has the largest archery company in the world now. But Matt still spends some of his free time going to the mall to pray for people and evangelize. So wow. Matt has impacted the world. He's helped. I think he's got hundreds and hundreds of employees, but he's just done a lot of good in the world. And so the question is, does God care about your compound bow? Does God care about the problem you're working on, Brett, and the problem I'm working on? We just need to ask him for solutions. I think he's got them.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for sharing that story about Matt. I hadn't read that, and that's just an amazing story. Love God stories like that, and you're exactly right. I mean, right now we're looking for solutions, and like what Paul says, we're looking for hope, we're looking for faith, we're looking for love, and we're looking for that, and we're looking for that in all these different places. And we're surrounded by entrepreneurs, and we're all trying to find these things. And you said one time, I was talking to my pastor one time, and I tell this story is that he had graduated from seminary school, and he had this mentor pastor, and he walked into his mentor pastor's office, and his mentor pastor said, "Are you sure that you want to do this? Are you sure that you want to be a pastor?" And my friend who was going to be a pastor, he said, "Yeah, why would you ask me that question?" And he said, "Well, it's because I used to be a businessman. I used to be an entrepreneur in the marketplace, and I felt like I had more impact when I was in the marketplace than I do now as a pastor." So when I ask you these questions, like you got your pastor over here, the person leading the church, and then you have entrepreneurs, business leaders over here, and you've mentioned a couple times that we can have more of an impact on the kingdom than the person possibly leading a church. Can you talk to us about that a little bit more? Maybe another story like Matt, or why do you think this when you look at the Bible too?
Yeah. So, the church, not to be critical, but we in the church have narrowed our focus into getting people inside the four church walls. But, God gave Lauren Cunningham and Bill Bright from Campus Crusade and YWAM almost the same dream right before they met for the first time. And that dream was about 7 spheres of influence in the world, 7 mountains, they called it. And those mountains would be completely different spheres. And those would be government, education, arts and media, science, technology, business, family, and church. And if we narrow our focus to just church in getting people inside those 4 walls, we're really limiting it. We're limiting what God can do in those other realms. So here's the problem. Anything we abandon, anything where light abandons is obviously filled by that void is filled by darkness. And so we say things like, yeah, those people in Hollywood, they're all going to hell. Let them go. Well, yeah. And look what they did. They influenced the whole world with their darkness. And it's the same. Now we know big business. We used to think big business was our friend, big pharma and all that. Let's be honest. They're probably not.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that, especially in the last year or two in America, as we've seen so much change and how Christians now are being kind of pushed into a corner. But that's another story. So here's the great news. We don't need to be the president or the CEO or the school board president or whatever have you to have a major influence. Think about 3 biblical characters. There's Esther, there's Daniel, and there's Joseph. None of the 3 were the king or the CEO or the president, but they all had massive influence on their culture and even the whole world. And they had that influence by effectively influencing the top person. Can you influence the top person? Can I? I think we can. Mark thought so too. Now, Mark worked for an unbelieving, atheistic Jewish boss. Mark had the boldness in his company to walk around and pray for people. And the Jewish boss heard this. And one day he staggered out of his office and he said, I've got migraines. Mark, can you just pray for me? And Mark said, sure. And he prayed for his unbelieving atheist Jewish boss, and he was completely healed on the spot. At least at that time, his headache went away, his migraine went away. Now he's got the boss's ear in a different way than he had before. Well, not long after this, the boss set up a customer appreciation event in Las Vegas at a big convention, and he rented out the big zip line there. Now, in this zip line, this was an outdoor zip line, obviously, and he rented it, and the zip line operator went to the boss and said, hey, bad news, there's a big storm rolling in. Look at this. We can't operate in the thunderstorm. And so we're going to have to shut down pretty soon here. And the boss goes, oh, no, no. Hey, Mark, come here. The unbelieving atheistic Jewish boss said, Mark, hey, can you just pray that storm will go in a different direction? Thank you. And then the boss turns around to this group of customers and says, don't worry, everybody. We got this guy here. He's going to go over there and pray, and the storm's going to go a different direction, and we'll be underway again in a few minutes. So Mark goes around the corner, panics, and he's like, what? And he texts a bunch of his friends and family and says, pray with me, help. Here's what's going on. Well, one of them texts back and said, I just see in my mind's eye a picture of like a dome of protection over the zip line area. And anyway, so the storm kept rolling forward, and then it split and it went on like both sides of the area where the zip line was. And somebody, for whatever reason, somebody way back from all this took a picture, and they said it looked like a dome of protection over the zip line. Here's the point. Do you think when this Jewish boss needs counsel or needs healing or needs something, he just might ask Mark for wisdom? Mark's got his ear now, and who knows what Mark could do to influence their products, their culture, their marketing, who knows what else. We can do this. This is our calling as believers, to influence culture. What an opportunity we have. And we have infinite intelligence from the Holy Spirit as far as creativity and wisdom. And we have great opportunities, whether we're the CEO or not.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that story. Just because the boss, the unbelieving boss, he had so much faith, right? It was like no big deal. It's like, hey, just pray it. It's gonna work out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what would you say, Paul, just to the entrepreneurs out there? They're believers. They work in the marketplace. Maybe they're leading their business as CEO. Maybe they're an employee. What would you say to them? They want to live out their faith, and maybe they're having that internal struggle as you are, and they're like, is this really what God wants me to do? Is this where God wants me to be? What would you say to that person right now? Some advice, some feedback on what can they do to help live out their faith?
Yeah, one idea from the Lord can, change your life, can change the world. I mean, one idea. And my company, I've never told this story before, actually, but my company in February, March, April was going through this real angst because we had upgraded our attorneys from syndication level attorneys to fund level attorneys. And every fund level attorney we interviewed said, you should do a different structure to be completely compliant with the SEC. Now that you're at this point, you ought to do this different structure. Well, honestly, it was just like really difficult to imagine jumping through that hoop. And it almost felt like we just can't go on. Well, I was walking through my house. I remember right where I was standing or walking, and I just had this thought came out of nowhere, like, you should become a REIT, REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. And I was like, no way. Well, anyway, that thought was strong enough that I thought that could be the Lord. So I went out and researched REIT attorneys, and I found an article that recommended 7 great attorneys to set up your REIT. Well, I still didn't want to do this. I couldn't imagine doing it. But check this out. I prayed specifically and decided to contact 3 of them just to see what I could learn. Of the 3, one didn't reply. Another one, I did a short call and it was uneventful. The third one said, hey, I've got an idea, a structure that virtually no one knows about, but the SEC has approved a completely different avenue for you that will work for you. And I really didn't know if I believed him, but this guy charges like $1,000 an hour. So I thought maybe he knows. Anyway, we went through this process with him and we found out we could do it. And it opened up a massive new channel of business for us.
Wow.
Well, that's what I would say to people. And that is, expect that those little thoughts you have, or those little, ideas, or that dream that you had or whatever, might be important.
Yeah.
And follow that up and really expect God to speak to you. When I really, really am expectant, Brett, and honestly, I don't spend most of my time expectant. I've got to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But when I am, I hear so many more things like that. And I really want to encourage people to really expect God to speak to you, because you are the answer for the world's problems.
Mm. Is there a certain posture that you do to hear from God, and just kind of have that expectations in your life? But is there a posture that you practice to hear from God? Because sometimes, as entrepreneurs, especially, we're super, super busy. We don't take time to listen.
Yeah, for me, maybe I'm biased because I'm a writer part-time, but I definitely, journaling, hands down, even if I have nothing to say when I open my journal, is the best way I hear from God. I have this little theory I've never been able to prove, but I think as an entrepreneur, I am so fast-paced all day. When I slow down long enough to write, my brain must focus on like the writing, I think. And I think that somehow opens up a channel for God to speak to me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for just sharing your stories. I know that you have some books. You talk about the self-storage book people can get on Bigger Pockets as well. And you have a book that you wrote on YouVersion too about the supernatural. What was that?
Yeah. Hey, what a time to celebrate. I just got an email yesterday that said YouVersion hit 500 million subscribers yesterday.
Wow.
So
That's
500
awesome.
million people around the world. And man, if I could just have some time to tell you what's happening about the gospel going around the world to unreached people groups and people at a record pace. There's record evil come. I mean, it seems like there's record amount of evil closing in, but at the same time, these same platforms, social media, all these things like YouVersion are getting the gospel out at an amazing pace. Well, I've got a Bible plan on there. It's just a Bible study. It's 6 or 7 days where we talk about doing business supernaturally. And that's the name of it, Doing Business Supernaturally. You can get access to that on YouVersion.
Awesome. Sounds good. Before we wrap up this show, you guys check that out on YouVersion. Before we wrap up the show, we've also had some conversations about something that's been on your heart, human trafficking, and just like to talk about that. We don't have to go too deep into it, but something that you've been focused on, something is huge need in the world. It's this hidden darkness that people don't like to talk about it because it's such an evil thing, but talk to about it. It's on your heart.
Brett, if you took the record profits, not the average, but the record profits of Apple, General Motors, Nike, and Starbucks, added those record profits together and tripled that number, that's the estimated annual revenues generated by human trafficking.
Wow.
Since we started this recorded discussion, an estimated 130 people have been sold or captured into human trafficking, sold into slavery. And I'd like to believe if I was alive in the 1800s, I'd be an abolitionist fighting against slavery. And I'd like to believe if I was an adult in the 1960s, I would have been fighting for righteous civil rights. Well, this is a civil right. It is slavery, and it's happening right under our noses. And so I want to encourage everybody to get a big why. Some reason that's transcendent, some reason that's beyond just doing great business, though I think that's a ministry in itself, like I said. And that big why, in part for me, is fighting human trafficking and rescuing its victims. And I really recommend that people check out Exodus Cry. There's a movie called Nefarious, which completely flipped my thinking on this. And there's also an organization called aimfree.org that's doing amazing work rescuing and caring for victims of human trafficking in Cambodia.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. We're going to put that in our description too, guys. Check out the movie in aim.org. We're going to put that in the description on the Brett Snodgrass YouTube channel.
Oh, it's aimfree.org. Sorry.
Aimfree.org. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. We're going to put that in our description on the Brett Snodgrass YouTube channel, guys, so check that out. Paul, thanks for being with us today, man. I always like to end every podcast with a fire round, so I have a couple of questions. I know you've already answered one about what you do in your free time, but number one, so favorite recently read book?
Yeah, I read a book, and I'm on my second pass now, called Live Not by Lies. And this book just took the Christian world by storm last fall. It's got, if I recall, thousands of mostly 5-star reviews. And it's Solzhenitsyn, which was a Russian dissident who came to the U.S. in the 70s, I think. He coined the term "live not by lies," which is basically a way for Christians to face the totalitarian state that is which seems to be where the United States is going toward.
Well, I'm going to get that book. I always like to ask you these questions because I always get the book right away as soon as this is over. So thanks for that. Cool. Favorite story in the Bible?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an obscure one. It's Jonathan and his armor bearer. What the heck? This is the dumbest war strategy in history. These guys are in a battle and they decide to climb up a hill to the enemy who's like got this advantage of being at the top of the hill, being able to shoot down at them. And they decide to climb up on their hands and knees to take on a whole army. Crazy, but God showed up and it was amazing.
Yes, there's so many. Yeah, I love that story. There's so many stories that God has people do such crazy things for him to show up, right? So we can depend on him. All right. And the last one was, what do you do in your free time?
Yeah. So this year I was able to actually have a COVID crisis, and I got a motorcycle. And the third time I rode this dirt bike going 3.5 miles an hour, I estimate, I toppled and my shoulder hurt for a month. I know I don't look 57, but I am. And you're probably thinking he looks 77. But anyway, so I traded that in. I traded it in for a 4-wheeler, and I'm having a great time 4-wheeling on my son's property. My son's got tons of mountain property here in southwestern Virginia. That's what he does for a living. We're having a great time.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Sounds good. Well, that's a wrap for today's podcast, Paul. Thank you so much for being on the Brett Snodgrass podcast. Wish you so much success in the future. Guys, go get Paul's book off Bigger Pockets. And God bless you, Paul.
Thank you, Brad. It's been great to be here.
Thank you so much for checking out the Brett Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.